Some people live their whole lives being unseen. They clean up after others. They learn to stay quiet, to take up as little space as possible, and the world rarely looks back at them. But sometimes all it takes is a voice, not loud, just real. Amara Ellis had been working as a janitor at Welton Corp for 13 years. Every morning, she took the service elevator. Every night, she left through the back gate. Most people didn't know her name. They just knew the sound of her mop echoing in the hallways after 7 p.m. But one day, that echo was replaced by something else, a voice. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't performing. She was simply helping a confused delivery man in perfect Brazilian Portuguese. And when CEO Jonathan Whitaker walked past that hallway, that voice made him stop. He turned his head, expecting to see a guest. Instead, he saw her. Dark skin, maintenance uniform, hair tied up, calm, precise, fluent. Whitaker blinked. Then he watched as she finished helping the man, turned around, and greeted a lost intern in flawless French. He was about to move on when she switched again, this time Mandarin, to assist a visiting supplier trying to navigate the building. By the time she walked away, Whitaker stood frozen in place. Who was this woman? And why was she folding towels in a basement?
Jonathan Whitaker wasn't the kind of CEO who got surprised easily. He'd worked across 3 continents, negotiated with governments, closed billion-dollar deals. But that voice, that unexpected, beautiful string of Portuguese from a janitor, made him pause. Not because she spoke one language, but because she didn't stop at one. He turned, curious, and watched Amara switch from Portuguese to French, guiding a confused guest, then to Mandarin, explaining something calmly to a supplier from Shanghai. Her tone changed with each language, her posture adjusted, her expressions matched each culture with uncanny ease. Whitaker didn't say a word. He just watched her walk back toward the service room like none of this was remarkable. Later that afternoon, he had someone from HR discreetly confirm her name. Amara Ellis, they said. Cleaning staff, night shift mostly, 13 years. 13 years, and not a single manager had ever brought up her name. Whitaker didn't wait. He called her upstairs. Amara walked into the executive floor like she didn't belong because she truly felt she didn't. She stood near the doorway, clutching her badge like a shield. Whitaker gestured to the chair across from him. "You speak French?" Amara blinked. "Yes, sir." "Portuguese?" "Yes." "Mandarin?" "Also, yes." "Anything else I should know?" She hesitated. "Toi, Swahili, Spanish, Arabic, a bit of Korean, and I'm working on Polish." Whitaker leaned back, clearly stunned. "You're fluent in how many?" "9, she said softly, "but I don't usually tell people." He was silent for a moment. "Why not?" Amara gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Because people don't expect someone with a mop to speak like someone at the podium." Whitaker chuckled, but not at her. He laughed the way you do when you realize you've missed something big, something that was right in front of you. "Amara, would you consider helping us interpret during a few meetings?" She paused. This wasn't part of her job. She wasn't even sure she could sit in a room full of suits without sweating. But something in Whitaker's tone wasn't commanding. It was curious, sincere. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll try." The elevator stopped on the 18th floor. The doors opened, and Amara stepped into a world she had quietly cleaned from behind the glass for over 13 years. Polished wood floors, the soft scent of citrus and leather, golden light falling across a framed world map behind the CEO's desk, marking every global branch of the company. She wasn't overwhelmed. She just looked around, slowly, deliberately, like someone used to entering places she was never expected to belong. Jonathan Whitaker greeted her with a quiet nod. No clipboard, no questions. Just an open chair, and a man willing to listen. "Amara," he said, leaning in, "I'll be honest, I didn't expect to be having this conversation today." She nodded, calm but steady. "Neither did I, sir. You speak 9 languages, fluently, and yet you've spent 13 years cleaning our offices. I want to understand why." Amara turned slightly toward the window, then back again. Her voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "Do you have time to hear a real story?" "I do," Whitaker said. She turned her palms upward, skin rough, calloused, and strong, as if opening the door to a past no one had ever asked about. "I was born in Toledo, Ohio. My mom's American, a night nurse in a nursing home. My dad came from Ghana. He worked in a welding plant. He spoke Twi to me from the time I could talk. That was my first second language, before I ever studied one in school. I grew up between 2 worlds. One was direct and American. The other was deep and African. As a kid, I didn't think much of it. But as I got older, people reminded me, constantly, 'You don't look like anyone else. Your hair is too thick. Your name sounds weird.' I learned to stay quiet, but I also learned to listen and remember. In high school, I was obsessed with language. I spent summers reading dictionaries. Eventually, I got a full scholarship to study linguistics at Kent State. I loved it. I learned fast. I understood not just the words, but what they meant between cultures. I dreamed of working across borders, not to become famous, but to help people understand one another." She paused, looking down at her palms, then inhaled softly. Her voice didn't tremble, but something inside was clearly bracing itself. "Then my mom got sick, stage 4 cancer. I dropped out and came home to take care of her. A month later, my father had a stroke. Within 6 weeks, both my parents were in the hospital." She swallowed hard. "And then my boyfriend left. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. No degree, no income, no backup. Everything crumbled in 1 season. I did whatever I could to survive. I worked checkout lines, cleaned motel bathrooms, took care of the elderly. Then a supervisor here, at this very building, told me I could apply for the night shift cleaning crew. The pay wasn't great, but the hours meant I could pick up my daughter after school. I didn't choose this job. I chose her." Whitaker said nothing. For the first time in a long time, he was simply listening, really listening, to a black woman sharing a dream no one had ever cared to ask her about. "I never stopped learning," she added. "I borrowed books from the library, listened to podcasts, French, German, Swahili, made flashcards and stuck them to the kitchen walls, read newspapers in 5 languages so I wouldn't lose the part of me that mattered, because it was the only thing that reminded me I still had a mind, I still had worth. But most people never ask. They see the uniform, and they assume." Whitaker stared at her, not with pity, but the stunned recognition of a man realizing what his company had overlooked for over a decade. She sat tall, calm, unapologetic, not asking for anything, because she wasn't seeking an opportunity. She was the opportunity.
Whitaker sat alone in his office for a long time after Amara left. He didn't open his laptop. He didn't call his assistant. He just pulled out a worn black notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote. Some talents don't show up on resumes. You don't count them in years, but when you see them, you can't look away. 3:45 p.m. Whitaker stepped into the elevator. But this time, he didn't press 18. He pressed B, the basement. The service level, where executives never go. No receptionist, no coffee, no soft light. Just a narrow hallway, pale fluorescent bulbs, peeling paint, the smell of disinfectant, and the distant roll of wheels on tile. Amara was folding clean towels in the supply room,
neatly, methodically, one at a time. She looked up when she heard the door open. "You came down here?" she asked, genuinely surprised. Whitaker gave a half smile. "I need help, urgently." "What kind of help?" "The delegation from Sao Paulo arrived early. Meeting starts in 30 minutes. Our interpreter didn't show. I remember you mentioned Portuguese. So, I need you to translate, just for this one meeting." The room went quiet. Amara stood still for a moment, not because she was confused, but because something inside her was wrestling. Can I really do this? What if I mess up? Will people think I'm trying to overstep? Is this a real opportunity or just a moment of curiosity? Whitaker sensed the hesitation. He didn't pressure her. He just said calmly, "There's no pressure. I just need someone who can make them feel heard and respected." A deep breath. Amara placed the last towel on the shelf, smoothed her uniform, straightened her collar, as if stepping onto a stage she'd rehearsed for her whole life. "Okay, I'll try." 25 minutes later, room 4C. No name tag, no fanfare, just 4 Brazilian businessmen waiting, and a black woman walking in with no formal introduction. "Boa tarde, sejam bem-vindos," Amara began. Soft, precise, flawless, not a sign of nerves. She didn't just translate words. She translated energy. She explained cultural nuance, responded to jokes, laughed on cue, paused at the right moments, matched the rhythm of the room. Within 10 minutes, the mood shifted, from formal to open, from guarded to conversational. Someone asked a follow-up, another offered a suggestion, a third cracked a joke, and Amara replied with a play on words so clever it made the whole room burst out laughing. Whitaker didn't understand everything, but he understood this. She was doing something no job description could define. When the meeting ended, one of the Brazilian guests shook Whitaker's hand and said, "She's the best interpreter we've worked with all year. Where did you find her?" Whitaker replied simply, "Right here, for 13 years." Out in the hallway, Amara walked with her usual calm. No smile, no false humility, just clarity. She turned and asked, "Do you need me for more meetings?" Whitaker paused, studied her for a long moment, then said, "I think it's time to create a role that doesn't exist yet." And that's what made Amara different. She didn't ask for a chance. She didn't beg to be seen. She just did the work so well they couldn't ignore her anymore. The next morning, in the conference room on the 18th floor, CEO Jonathan Whitaker stood before his leadership team. "I want to create a new role in this company," he said, "a language and internal communication coordinator." A few brows raised. "That role doesn't exist," someone noted. Whitaker nodded. "Because we've never had anyone like her before." He recounted what happened the day before. The unexpected early arrival of the Sao Paulo delegation, the absent interpreter, and the janitor who walked in and saved the negotiation with nothing but timing, tact, and words. "She's not just multilingual," he said. "She understands tone, culture, people." She didn't stick to her job description. She did what the company needed, exactly when it was needed. One of the legal directors chimed in. "But does she have a degree, any formal training?" Whitaker answered without hesitation. "I'm not here to talk about diplomas today. I'm proposing a 30-day trial. No title, no fanfare, just a chance for her to show us what she can really do." No one objected. But not everyone was convinced. Some agreed out of curiosity. Others were waiting for him to be wrong. Week 1, Amara helped a Turkish accountant understand the company's insurance process in his native language. Week 2, she diffused a cultural misunderstanding between the Italian and American design teams before it turned into a full-blown HR complaint. Week 3, she rewrote onboarding materials in dual languages, resulting in a sharp drop in early resignations. She wasn't assigned those tasks. She simply saw the gaps and filled them. Quietly, completely. Then came day 27. Amara was double-checking contract files sent over by a South Korean partner. No one had asked her to do it. She just wanted to make sure no cultural nuance had been overlooked. That's when she caught it. A critical mistranslation in Clause 4.2. The English draft read, "full unrestricted access to proprietary technology." But the original Korean version said, "limited access during the period of collaboration." If the company signed the current version, they'd essentially hand over full rights to a $1.2 billion algorithm permanently. Amara didn't panic. She didn't burst into anyone's office. She just wrote a short email, attached both versions, highlighted the discrepancy, and ended with one quiet line. "I believe we may want to revisit Clause 4.2 before signing." No caps, no exclamation marks, no drama. But that email saved the entire deal. The next day, the head of legal walked straight into Whitaker's office. "I think she's more than just lucky." Still, in the hallways, the whispers kept floating. Who does she think she is, reviewing legal contracts? Trying to show off? Give it a week. She'll be back with a mop. Amara heard them, but this time she didn't shrink, because now she knew. Value doesn't come from where people look, but from what you do when no one's watching. That afternoon, her final day of the trial, she received a short email from Whitaker. "Meet me at 4:30. No need to bring anything. Just show up as yourself." Amara didn't put on makeup. She didn't carry a folder. She wore a simple white blouse, dark slacks, and walked to the 18th floor as herself. Nothing added, nothing to prove. Because integrity doesn't need a spotlight. And once someone steps out of the shadows, they no longer need permission to be seen. Amara walked into the office on the 18th floor. No flowers, no balloons. Just CEO Jonathan Whitaker standing by the window, his eyes lit up. "Welcome," he said. "You're officially in your new role." On the desk sat a simple wooden nameplate, Amara Ellis, Language and Culture Integration Officer. It wasn't flashy, but to Amara, it was the first time her name had ever appeared on anything above the basement. News of her appointment spread fast. A lawyer from legal sent her a handwritten note. "You made me want to stay at this company longer." An Indonesian engineer shook her hand, eyes glowing. "For the first time, I feel like this company has a place for people like us." But not everyone was smiling. The praise sparked quiet tension. Whispers in the hallway, frozen stares, snide remarks. A janitor turned executive? She's a single mom, right? Probably played the system. How'd she end up on the 18th floor? Slept her way up? On day 3, a blurry old photo appeared in the company's internal group chat. Amara, 20 years old, standing outside a bar next to a foreign man. The caption read, "So that's what she meant by language skills." No one needed to sign it. The damage was instant. The buzz moved through admin, legal, marketing in minutes. People who used to smile at her now avoided her gaze. A colleague who once asked her for help translating an email now buried her face in her screen as Amara walked by. Amara didn't respond, didn't delete the post, didn't explain. She kept translating documents, helping teams resolve miscommunication, fixing typos for interns. But the smile she used to wear was gone. That afternoon, she stepped into Sarah's office, head of marketing. Just last week, Sarah had called her graceful. Now she didn't even stand up. "You reviewed a client document without checking with me first? Who do you think you are?" Amara stood still, voice calm. "There was a mistranslation. If we hadn't corrected it, we could have lost the deal." Sarah smirked. "Next time, follow the chain of command. You're not the only one here who speaks Portuguese." Amara nodded and left. But inside, something twisted. Am I overstepping? Am I in the wrong room? That evening, she came home early. Her steps felt heavier than usual. Zuri, her 12-year-old daughter, sat at the kitchen table doing homework. "Did someone yell at you today?" she asked, eyes wide. Amara blinked. "Why do you say that?" Zuri shrugged. "You're not smiling, like when Grandma passed away." Amara sat beside her, ran her fingers across the edge of Zuri's workbook. "Some people don't want me in my new position. They dug up old photos, tried to use them to embarrass me." Zuri paused, looking right at her, then closed her notebook, voice steady. "If they talk bad about you because of the past, then just be amazing now. I want to tell my friends how cool my mom is." Amara didn't cry. She just nodded. A slow, steady nod like a stone being set into place. Because now she knew. She didn't need the whole world to believe in her. Just one little girl, with eyes full of truth. Justification doesn't always need a mic. Sometimes you just live in a way that makes the people who love you never question who you are. After her official appointment, Amara didn't take a vacation. She didn't ask for a break. She came in every day like she always had. No private office, no assistant, just a notebook, a lukewarm cup of tea, and one growing question in her mind. How many people are like me, who understand but don't speak up, who have ideas but hold them in, who are talented but remain unseen? 10 days into her new role, she sent out a short company-wide email. Language and culture support sign-up. If you've ever stayed quiet because you didn't understand something or felt lost in a room that wasn't built for you, I'm here. Let me help you be heard. The first responses were modest. A Vietnamese intern who kept getting called by the wrong name, a Kenyan engineer who was always interrupted in meetings, a Spanish-speaking receptionist who felt more fluent in kindness than in English. Amara didn't open an official help desk. She went to them, sat beside them, reworded resumes, rehearsed promotion interviews, translated not just phrases but emotion, turned what they meant to say into what others needed to hear. By the second week, the requests doubled. One employee asked her to rephrase an apology email. Another needed someone to listen to a dry run of their first client pitch. One person just needed to be heard in the language they thought no one in the company understood. A middle manager finally asked, "What exactly are you doing? I don't see this in the org chart." Amara smiled gently. "I'm not changing company policy. I'm just helping people get better." But not everyone liked that. One department head issued an internal memo. "Please direct all language support requests to HR. Avoid contacting individuals directly." No names, but everyone knew who it was aimed at. People who had once thanked her now looked the other way. Her name disappeared from email threads about onboarding, diversity initiatives, cultural training. Then came the big company-wide event, celebrating culture and inclusion. Amara, who had been doing that work daily, wasn't even invited. There was no attack, no open backlash, just absence. A silence colder than rejection. That night, Amara came home to her small apartment. Her father, Mr. Kwame, sat by the window quietly folding an old newspaper. He looked up, eyes kind, and said, "You look like your mother did, the day she was laid off." Amara let out a quiet, tired laugh. "I thought I was doing something good, helping people have a voice." Kwame nodded. "You are. But good work doesn't always come with applause." He poured her a glass of water, then added, "Some people are used to being the only voice in the room. When someone new speaks up, they feel threatened." Then he stood up, placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, the same hand that held kitchen knives for 30 years in a small Italian restaurant. "Keep going. Your mother was silenced by a whole system, but if you can help just one person avoid that fate, it's worth it." Amara didn't say anything, not because she had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in a long time, she felt understood without needing to translate. Sometimes you don't need to speak loudly. You just need to stand firm right where you are, doing what's right, even when no one is looking.
Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. For the first time in 3 years, the entire company gathered in the main hall. The theme on the screen read, "Restructuring Company Culture. How do we truly hear each other?" It sounded polished, proper, and dangerously easy to ignore. Amara hadn't been invited at first, but a week earlier, CEO Whitaker had quietly added her name to the speakers list. No announcement, no fanfare. When the host read the next line, "Our next speaker, Amara Ellis, founder of the Voice Inside initiative," the room shifted. Chairs creaked. Phones lit up. A few people sighed visibly. And as Amara stepped up to the mic, there were whispers, eye rolls, and one exec who took a sudden interest in his coffee. She wore a plain white blouse, gray slacks, no makeup, just a folded piece of paper in her hand, which she never looked at. She scanned the room slowly. Half the faces had passed her in the basement without a glance. A third had ignored her emails. A few had once smiled at her, but went silent when the rumors started. She took a long, deep breath and began. "I was a janitor in this company for 13 years. I used to mop the very hallways you walked through. I heard everything you said, because you thought I didn't understand. But I did." The room quieted. One phone was locked and set aside. Another hand stopped scrolling. I've heard people dismissed because their accent was different. I've seen bright minds passed over, not because they lacked ideas, but because they lacked permission to speak. I've watched people shrink in rooms where they didn't see anyone who looked like them. She paused, set the folded paper down on the podium. We talk a lot about diversity, about inclusion, but sometimes what people really need isn't a policy. It's a nod instead of an eye roll, a seat at the table that doesn't feel borrowed, a space where their voice doesn't feel like noise. The silence in the room changed, not cold, not resistant, just still. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. I don't have an Ivy League degree, but I know what it's like to be capable and underestimated, to want to speak up and be too tired of not being heard. Voice Inside isn't a program, it's an invitation to listen, not just to the loudest person at the table, but to those whose courage is still finding its way out. A senior director leaned forward. A marketing lead finally picked up her pen. Amara looked toward the front row, toward the few who had once whispered, "She doesn't belong on this floor." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It just held. "I don't need everyone here to like me. I just hope one day someone in this room asks themselves, who on my team wants to speak but doesn't feel safe enough to try? Because if this company truly wants to grow, it can't just listen to voices from the top down. It has to start listening to the whispers from below." She stepped back, bowed her head slightly. No claps, no rebuttals, just silence. But this time, the silence wasn't from apathy. It was from thought. A small voice may not change the whole world, but it might reach one heart, and one heart can change the way people see each other. 2 days after Amara's speech, the inbox of the Voice Inside initiative exploded. Over 80 messages, from every floor, every corner of the company. A Syrian-born engineer wrote, "I've been passed over for promotion 3 times and never knew why." A Romanian assistant shared, "I thought I was the problem. Turns out this company just never learned how to understand people like me." 3 departments requested Amara to lead intercultural workshops. A group of interns proposed launching an internal podcast with her. A few mid-level managers invited her to lunch, not for PR, but for her thoughts. It felt like a beginning, a shift, the kind people write about in business books. But that's when the real undercurrent began to surface. On day 5, Amara received a brief message from HR. The Voice Inside program is temporarily suspended for internal review. Her email access was restricted. She could no longer message the multilingual employee groups. A week later, her small shared office was recommended for merger into the internal communications department, led by someone who had once openly criticized her work. Whitaker called her in. No assistant, no PR rep, just a closed door and a direct conversation. "They say your program didn't follow protocol, no official approval." Amara gave a faint smile, but her eyes were different now. It's not because it lacked approval, it's because it worked better than what they were ready to accept. Whitaker paused, then asked quietly, "What do you want me to do?" Amara looked him in the eye. "I don't need you to save me. I just need to know, will you stand with me?" He sat upright, no blink, no hesitation. "I'm not the one who leads the charge, but if you keep walking, I'll take the wind off your back." She nodded, not for permission, but because for the first time, she knew someone didn't want her to stop. On day 10, a document titled Internal Review Summary was circulated among management. No signatures, no clear authors, but its message was loud. The Voice Inside initiative is fostering division, victim mentality, and disrupting internal communication flow. At the same time, employees who had previously engaged with Amara began getting calls from HR. Not official warnings, just career development conversations. A tech team lead who signed up for a mentoring session with Amara was quietly removed from a major project the following week. No one said it outright, but everyone knew. Amara had gone beyond a program. She had touched the system itself. And the system doesn't like being touched. That night, Amara stood alone on the 4th-floor balcony. Her tea had gone cold. The city lights still flickered. But inside, she felt unsteady. Her father, Kwame, stepped out from inside the apartment. "Zuri's asleep," he said gently. Amara didn't turn, just stared out into the night. "Dad, what if I stopped now? Would it matter?" Kwame looked at her for a long time, then answered softly, "You can stop. That's your choice. But if you made people listen, and then you go quiet, that silence will weigh heavier than all the years you were never heard." She said nothing, just looked down at her hands, the same ones that once held a mop in silence. But now, they were holding something far greater than an old dream. A responsibility to a generation learning how to be heard. Your voice may be small, but if it makes others stop, think, and begin to speak their truth, then it's no longer just a voice. It's an echo. After the speech that left the auditorium in silence, Amara returned to her desk. No applause, no follow-up meeting. Just people who used to pass her by, now pausing, looking twice. A quiet nod from across the room. A subtle smile in the hallway. A silence that no longer felt empty. 3 days later, the Voice Inside inbox received over 200 emails. No demands, no outrage, just stories. "You helped me fix my presentation. They picked me. I used to fear speaking up. Now I coach the new hires on how to talk to the boss. My English isn't great, but you told me your voice matters no matter the language." A group of interns suggested Voice Inside should be part of onboarding. A marketing exec wrote, "We have a diversity policy, why not a listening culture?" The whispers shifted. What was once called divisive was now connecting. What was disruptive was now illuminating what we overlooked. Then one morning, Amara was called to the top floor, a floor she had once cleaned 13 years ago, but never stepped onto in invitation. Whitaker was waiting. No small talk. "We want you to lead Voice Inside, build a team, expand it globally." Amara stood silent, not from fear, but from the weight of what that meant. "I'll do it," she finally said, "but not alone. I want to train people like me, so they can speak for their communities too." Whitaker smiled. "Just keep being yourself. That's what got us here." 1 month later, Voice Inside became an official global internal culture program. Amara ran it, but still kept her old desk by the hallway. She didn't need a power seat to amplify voices. She was the power now. On launch day, she stood in a room filled with new team members. A young woman from Nepal, an intern from Colombia, a father from Haiti, all looking at her, waiting. She began, calm, clear, grounded. "I'm not here to speak for anyone. I'm here to listen, until you believe in your voice enough to speak it yourself." That evening, in her small apartment, Zuri ran into the kitchen and hugged her tightly. "Mom, someone at school said I was weird today. I told them, I'm not weird. I'm my mother's daughter, and my mom does amazing things." Amara laughed, full, bright, real. She hugged her daughter close, then placed her wooden nameplate on the shelf beside an old, worn dictionary from her quiet learning years. In that moment, she knew. Every quiet step, every invisible struggle, every time she bit her tongue was so Zuri would grow up in a world where silence wasn't the safest choice. They once thought she was just the cleaning lady, but Amara didn't mop floors. She cleared the barriers that language and bias had built. And Unseen Struggles tells the stories the world often overlooks. Amara Ellis didn't need a loud voice. She just needed to be heard once, so that hundreds of others could find the courage to speak. In a leadership meeting months later, Whitaker would say, "Amara isn't just an employee. She's proof that talent doesn't need a title to shine. One person can start it, but it takes a community to change the system forever."